was in his senior who are sitting here already.
Actually, younger child is
Okay.
who's on the end.
Okay.
On.
Super. See, you never know. Yeah. Well, actually, yeah. Luckily, I was up at 6:30, so I was able to get things. Could you just grab my seat?
Check. Well, my husband's international and it's supposed to be
The walls might come crumbling down.
Well, that's what I'm worried about, you know? It's always iffy.
Okay. Well.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For the benefit of our folks who are watching from home and logging onto their computers and checking their sound, for the next 5 minutes, we're going to have some music from John Shepherd.
Will you please join me in lighting our chalice this morning? The words are in your order of service. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
Thank you, John. Always great. Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Clay Barnard, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Low Country. My name is Clay Barnard, president of the board. I'm filling in for Charlie today. He called yesterday, early in the morning. He has COVID, unfortunately. So I wish him a speedy recovery. I'm sure he's at home watching this on video now. I'd like to start today by welcoming our visitors. If you are here for the first time or second time and you're comfortable doing it, would you please stand in your place and give us your name and where you're from? I'm going to go this section first, this one, and then this one. Change it up a little bit. I know we've grown a little bit, and people seem to be a little bit more frightened to stand up. But if you are new, it helps us to get to know you better, particularly during after coffee. And I'm sure there's someone else that lives near you. So, first or second time, anyone in this group here?
I'm Nancy Bender, visiting from the New Building.
Thank you. And the middle section.
Hi, I'm Liz Blackstock from the Assistant Threats, and we are from Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Welcome.
And over here. Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can join us for Talkback after the service. It's a wonderful opportunity to also get to know us a little bit better. Just a few announcements today. Mark your calendars for the next Music on Malfris. That will be February 3rd at 7 o'clock, a few weeks from now. No Fuss and Feathers, I love the name, No Fuss and Feathers, will be performing, and we're looking for a big turnout. I'd like to talk briefly about Safety and Security Committee. Steve and Andrea Clark, they're hiding back there guarding the door. Steve and Andrea Clark are leading this group and doing a great job. You may have noticed the past few months we've had someone manning the doors, and they need help doing this. This has been going on for about 2 months, and we're trying to build a group of people that are willing to volunteer and man the doors. They will be available after service to explain in detail what's involved. If you have any interest, just an inkling of interest, please talk to them. It's not like you're committing forever, but they're missing the service because they're manning the doors, and we need to help them out. So if you have any kind of interest, please do talk with them. They've done a great job. Pathway to Belonging was supposed to begin today. Is that right, Ann? We're going to have to cancel that since Charlie has COVID. He'll be out for a while, and our numbers are low for it. So we're going to move that to mid-April. Okay, great. Finally, yesterday we had a beautiful service honoring Paul Weiser. Thank you for your help in celebrating his life. We will miss him. Now Dick Hood will give our opening remarks.
Good morning. First of all, a word of thanks. Thanks to all of you. You really could have stayed in bed this morning. And you chose to come to this congregation. I'm reminded of the words of my real estate agent 14 years ago who said, thank you, who said, oh, winters around here, it's always sunny and warm. Well, she got that half right. But again, I do appreciate the fact that just so many of you decided to come out on a day when it might have been easier to stay in, quite frankly. I'm going to start with two quotes, and they, within our history, in our movement, these are two fairly famous quotes. The first one is from the Unitarian side of our denomination, and the second is from the Universalist side. And the first one is from Thomas Jefferson, who wrote a letter to James Smith in 1822. And he wrote these words: "The pure and simple unity," keyword, the unity of the creator of the universe is now all but ascendant in the eastern states. It is dawning in the west and it's advancing towards the south. And I confidently expect that the present generation will see Unitarianism become the general religion of the United States. Well, Thomas didn't get that. Thomas didn't get that totally right. He was a good guy, but the second quote is from a gentleman named John Murray, and I'm going to have more to say about him during the sermon. He is considered to be the founder of universalism in the United States, in America. Recently, historians have started to question if he really said or wrote these words. But, you know, for years and years and years, these were attributed to John Murray, and so we're going to, today, continue to attribute them to John Murray. And he wrote this, and he said, "You may possess only a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage." Good guy, John Murray. Our opening hymn is number 361. Please rise as you're willing and able. Cheryl?
Sorry, I was looking in Tish's direction. Thought she was going to do joys and concerns. But I'm going to ask you to give to the two food pantries that we support, one in Bluffton and one in Hilton Head. And if you have brought some non-perishables, to share with the community, please put them in the back of the sanctuary on the table where you'll see some bags already. And in addition, we will support this church with our gifts, our time and our talent, and we will do that through passing the basket, which are over there. My husband is pointing out. Thank you for your generosity.
Good morning. This is the portion of our service where we share our joys and concerns. We share them because if we share our joys, they are enhanced, and we share our concerns, they make them easier to bear. So if you have something you would like to share, we ask that you come forward, state your name, take a stone from the basket, tell us what you want to share, and place the stone in the carom. No political statements nor any announcements at this time. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Betsy, and I've not been at services for a couple of weeks, and I want to thank you for making me better. You sent me cards, you sent me good wishes, you sent me love, and and a pack of steroids from my doctor. Thank you. I want to talk about the care committee for a few minutes. You know that Kathy Quirk, our beloved longtime member, is in New York, and she is at the end of her life in hospice with her family. And they have moved her to a different hospital, and Mike has put that address up in the back on the easel. So if you want to send her a card, that is the place to send it. But please send it quickly, because I understand from her daughter, Erin, that her time is short. If you want to send a personal message to her, which she'll get fairly quickly, you can do that from sending it to her daughter, Erin. And if you have any questions, please see me later.
That's by the front door, or by the front door.
The easel is by the front door, Mike says. Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ellen, and for those of you who know my family, you know my sister is the oldest and acts like it. But I have to say, since she's out of the room, for the service that Maxine pulled off amazingly, like so organized, so crafted, so beautiful. And then Charlie got COVID. And I mean, Anne had an hour's notice. And she stepped in and she was just absolutely beautiful and amazing. So, here's my joy. And here's my concern. And it's a bit of an ethical dilemma that I've been tossing around in my head and trying to figure out what would I have done. So as I describe the situation, you can also think, what would you do? So not too long ago, I had two clients that both tested positive for COVID, and their doctors were the same. And their doctors called in Paxlovid, and they said, Ellen, can you go get it? Of course I can. So I went to go get Paxlovid for these two different people. I went to Walgreens, and I went through the drive-thru. And the girl looked at me and she said, here you go, it's free. And I said, oh, great, this is gonna be easy. And then I went to Publix to pick up the other woman's. And they said, okay, it's $1,300. I said, hold on, wait, I don't think I can make that decision. So I called the family. And I said to the son, they are saying that your mom's insurance is such that the Paxlovid is $1,300. What do you want me to do? I don't know. He says, what? I guess, I mean, I had her credit card. Should I put it on her credit card? He thought, I don't know if her credit card's going to support that. Maybe you could just put it on my credit card. Ugh. I said, okay, I'll get back to you. So then I called the sister, and I said, what is it you want me to do with this? And she said, well, I'm not spending $1,300 on 5 days of medicine. How's my mom doing? Right? So then I didn't do anything yet, and then I talked with the pharmacist, and she said, well, there is a thing, Paxlovid coupons. If you go online, you can. So I stepped away from the pharmacy and called David, because you know David's amazing and he does all that kind of stuff. Living with a professional IT guy is just, right. So anyway, I called him, he went right on it, and within 5 minutes, I had the coupon number, and I went back to the pharmacy and I said, I have the coupon for Paxlovid. She looked at it, she went back to her computer, and then she said, that's a hard no. Yeah, her insurance will not even use the coupon. Now what do I do? So I called back the son. He said, here's my credit card number. There's no way that I can say no to this, and 2 days from now my mother dies from COVID, and I wouldn't spend $1,300 to save her, right? Called the daughter back. I'll go up to 100. But no, not gonna do that. Not gonna spend that kind of money. I left the store. But before I left the store, I said to the pharmacist, what would you do if this was your mom? He said, you know what? If it was my mom, I would do it. If it was my dad, I would not. But his reasoning, once I confronted him on his reasoning on that, was because Paxlovid, if you don't have a good liver, you shouldn't be taking that anyway. And some of these pills that she was already on, maybe she shouldn't be taking while she's taking the Paxlovid. It gets complicated. But one woman got the medicine, one woman did not get the medicine. Both women at this point are doing okay. But what would you do?
I won't answer that. I have a joy and concern, and it relates to Kathy. Where I know how fast things are happening in the congregation, but the joy about Kathy and the congregation, for me, is we have those small group dinners. And about 6 weeks ago, we had a small group dinner at Kathy's house. It was just a wonderful dinner, a chance to get to know one another well. And many of you know Kathy well, and how much she's done for this church, and her sense of social justice is absolutely incredible. So it's been a joy to be with her and see the effect on the church. It's been a joy to listen to her kids talk about her and the love they have for their mom. She did have the opportunity to be with her family over the break, and they celebrate that. And it's just sad that it happened so fast.
Hi, I'm Diana. Kathy Kirk was also in our Zoom meditation group every week. Mike and Betsy and Clay and Wynette and a few other people. And I'm just in shock and just so sad. About Kathy. You're right, it's so fast. She just always looked so together and so healthy and so just healthy. And it really is a shock. The gentleman I saw for 10 weeks, he admitted to loving Trump. So I know we're not supposed to say anything political, but yeah, you can imagine how I felt about that. And so I will be dating, I'll be real clear about who I choose to date early on. Nip that in the bud real quick so I don't waste my time. Anyway, that's a joy and a concern. Anyway, thank you. And the service yesterday with Maxine was amazing. And to get to meet your brother and everybody, it was a beautiful, beautiful service. And I know Paul is looking down, and I believe he's in the spirit world, in the spirit of love. And he was with us and still is.
I'm Barbara Minchie, and I agree that Ann Harrison is absolutely a jewel. But Skip said of Kathy Quirk, and I agree, she's the most pleasant woman I've known.
I have two stones for the joys and concerns that we keep in our heart. Now, if you would turn to number 436 in the back of your hymnal and read this affirmation with me. As soon as I put my glasses on so I can actually see. We come to this time and this place to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the mind for our heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, and to reclaim the vision of earthly fair and all redeemed world while.
Thank you, everyone. If you watch any television at all, or on Netflix, or excuse me, on Amazon Prime, you'll notice that at the beginning of the movie or the show, up in the left-hand corner, there are these little warning signs. Might say sex, violence, drugs. I want to assure you there's none of those in this sermon. And I can assure you even further that I'm not taking off any garments, and there's no nudity as well. Just make that clear. George, really?
Maybe I should just.
George, that was not called for. However, I do want to give you a warning because my preaching professor used to say to the class that don't give details about your own life. That's just not appropriate in a sermon. And I am guilty of that this morning. I'm going to be giving you a number of details about my life, and if you don't like that, go talk to my preaching professor. He only died about 40 years ago. Whatever. My goal today is very simple. I want to talk about how we got this name, Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Low Country. 7 words, 18 syllables to describe who we are. What a mouthful. What were they thinking when they made up this? I wasn't around, so I had nothing to do with making up this name, but this has not always been the name of this group. And it was chosen back, I think, in 2010, maybe a little later, to be the name of our congregation. And I'm going to try and explain how we ended up with such a long name, but I'm going to assume that you know that you live in the Low Country. By the way, when I first moved here and I heard that expression, I thought it was a pejorative. Oh, well, this is the Low Country. I found out that's not really true. It describes geography. I'm going to flip them the names just a little bit, and talk first of all about the Universalist name the name of our congregation, and how it came about. There have always been people looking at scriptures way back from any time after the Bible was printed and easily available, and coming to different conclusions about what true Christianity is or was. And there was a man who was a Methodist preacher, young Methodist preacher in England. And he found, there were other people that found it beforehand, but he really studied the scripture, and he decided that this idea of God sending people to hell to burn for damnation really didn't have a biblical basis. Yeah, there's mentions of it, but there are more mentions of God as a loving God. God as someone who sent his only Son to die for our sins. And it is John Murray who left the Methodist Church or the Methodist denomination and embraced what came to be known as Universalism, the idea of universal salvation. That in the end, God, because God is a loving God, is going to bring everybody to heaven. It doesn't mean that you don't get to go to hell along the way, however. John Murray made that very clear, that if you're going to run around and sin, you're going to pay. But in the end, don't worry, you're going to go to heaven because we have universal salvation. Life was not kind to John Murray. His first wife died. He had very bad eyesight and was in the process of really having some problems. And he didn't have any money, And supposedly he actually spent some time in debtor's prison. And he finally decided he needed to get out of England and come to the colonies for a fresh start. And so he arranged and he got on a ship, which was a long journey then. This is now 1770, prior to the American Revolution, and was a passenger on a ship to come to the New World to find his whatever he might find in the New World. Hope, peace, and happiness, probably. Well, as the ship came to the U.S. coast, the American coast, it wasn't the U.S. then, a big storm came. And the ship was blown off course. It was heading for New York City, but it was blown off course, and it ran aground someplace south of New York City. Turns out today we call that New Jersey, but they didn't call it New Jersey back then. And the captain asked if there would be a group of volunteers, at least 5 or 6, who might take a smaller boat and go ashore and find out the way to New York City. John Murray was among them, and he left and he stepped foot in America. When he got there, he met a man named Thomas Potter. Thomas Potter was a farmer, probably a reasonably wealthy farmer. At least he was wealthy enough that he also had discovered Universalism, and he decided he was going to build a chapel on his farm, and that he didn't know who was going to preach there, but that's where the Universalism, the doctrine of universal salvation, was going to be preached, and someone would come and preach there. Son of a gun, John Murray shows up, and you don't know if all of this is true. I imagine there's been some embellishment over the years. But they get talking, and they find out they're both Universalists. And Thomas Potter prevails on John Murray, and John Murray goes to that little chapel, and he preaches the first Universalist sermon in America. John Murray went on, after a while, to go to Gloucester, Massachusetts, and became the minister of the first Universalist church in America. And the idea of universal salvation really caught on pretty quickly. People were tired of hearing about how they were going to go to hell and burn. The idea of God as a loving God was a very popular idea. And Universalism spread quite quickly. It spread primarily because there was a group of circuit riders who went around and founded small, rural, pretty much Universalist churches, first in the Northeast, and then, interestingly enough, in the South. And there are still a couple of remnant, small congregations that call themselves Universalist in South Carolina, interestingly enough. Things went well for a while, but after the Civil War, by the way, John Murray also served as a chaplain in the George Washington's army. It's kind of an interesting fact. The gospel of Universalism grew. People went to the Bible and they found those same passages that affirmed the loving God. And things were going well until other churches caught on. And the fire and brimstone movement, gradually over 100 years, faded a great deal. And you didn't hear in mainline Protestant churches much then about burning in hell. And as such, Universalist churches faded because their message was no longer as unique. And a great many Universalist churches simply folded up. But there were a few remnants. one of the remnants, interestingly enough, for me anyway, was that there were some famous Universalists. Clara Barton, for whom we have named our library in this church, was a Universalist. P.T. Barnum, who of circus fame, was a benefactor of Tufts University, which was founded, interestingly enough, by Universalists and had, for many, many years, a theological school, a Unitarian Universalist theological school, which when I was admitted to Tufts, I planned to go there because I could get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in 6 years. And at the end of my first year, they closed the theological school. Those Universalists, they're going to get you at every turn. Another famous Universalist was George Pullman of Pullman car fame. And I have a connection to George Pullman. For 35 years, I served part-time, never full-time, part-time, at a church in Albion, New York, halfway between Rochester and Buffalo. And it was, and still is, called the Pullman Memorial Unitarian, or now Unitarian Universalist Church. Back then it was just Universalist. George Pullman had tons of money, but he was born in this little village in upstate New York. And he came back to Albion and built a church in memory of his mother and father. That's why it's called Pullman Memorial. And it's a beautiful building with lovely wood carvings, a hall that seats probably 400, and Tiffany windows throughout the entire, not just for the entire sanctuary, but the entire church. The biggest one being Jesus in the grapevine garden. And it's famous also because Tiffany actually came to Albion and signed that window. So there's another intersection of my own life. By the time I got there, it was a very small congregation, and it remained a very small congregation for all the time I was there. But it still exists and thrives. But times were tough for Universalists, and particularly after World War II, they started to stray away from Christianity, and that brought it to their own sense of tensions between old people and new people. And we'll stop that right there and pick it up in a little bit. The Unitarians, in some ways, had it a lot easier. First of all, they could trace their history all the way back to the 5th century, when a bishop at the Council of Nicaea named Arius decided, that's the council where really the doctrine of the Trinity, God in 3 persons, Blessed Trinity, for those of you who come from a Protestant background and sung the doxology, he decided, no, that was wrong, it wasn't scriptural, and he left. So there was always been in Europe this fragments of Unitarianism. But it wasn't really until the United States in the late 1700s and early 1800s that the doctrine became popular. And it became popular in a very different way. Back then there were established churches. Every community had its one church that was established and for a long time was actually supported by the taxpayers, whether you went there or not. But you were pretty much expected, particularly in a little small village in New England, that you were going to go to that church because it was on the common and it was white and it had a steeple. All those churches, more in New England, but also down here in the South to some degree, went through a crisis time in belief. And there were the Unitarians saying, one God, and the Trinitarians saying, God in 3 persons. That may sound like, what the hell difference does it make? But back then, it was really important. And these Unitarians and those Trinitarians didn't get along. And so in all those established churches, what occurred was there was an internal conflict, And either the Trinitarians threw out the Unitarians, and the Unitarians went off and built their own church, or the Unitarians threw out the Trinitarians, and the Trinitarians had to go and build their own church. I was raised from age 10 in a congregation in Waltham, Massachusetts, referred to as the First Parish. We didn't even talk about Unitarian. We were the First Parish. The Unitarians in Waltham, Massachusetts won. The Congregationalists got kicked out and went down Main Street and built their own spire and sanctuary. In many places, though, the Trinitarians won. In Brunswick, Maine, if you ever go to Brunswick, Maine, I'm familiar with, beautiful church right by Bowdoin College. First Parish Church, Congregational, now United Church of Christ. The Unitarians got kicked out and had to go down the street and build their own sanctuary. And that's how Unitarianism really took hold. It was a movement that far more intellectual than Universalists. It was the thinking man's religion. It was also the religion of the reasonably well-to-do. Not necessarily they were all rich, that's not true at all. But when I went to the First Parish, there were doctors, and this is now 65 years ago, not true today, but there were doctors and lawyers. It was very much an establishment kind of church. And if you go out and you look, we have, it used to be on the wall, right now it's on the floor, but that's another story, but there's even a big, huge poster, 100 famous Unitarian Universalists. And if you look in the ones who were Unitarians, in general, they were well educated, they were reasonably well off, and they were thinking men and women. Both Unitarians and Universalists held in common a great deal. They were different, but they held in common a great deal. One, an emphasis on here and now, righting the wrongs of this world and not worrying as much about the other world, the world up there or the world down there. And that took the form, and still is today, the idea of Unitarian Universalists active in social justice. We want to make things right, or we want to make things better. We take literally out of Scripture, even though we don't pay much attention to Scripture anymore, the idea of feeding the poor and loving our enemies. I only put that in for those of you who were here last week. They also held together the idea of freedom. And the idea is that, wait a minute, we don't rely on necessarily one book, one pope, one synod, whatever, that the ultimate responsibility for us to determine our religious faith comes from us, you. You are free, and you to believe as you wish, as long as you have thought it out. This is not, hopefully, a religion of faddism, but it's your responsibility. It's nobody else's. And that comes from both the Unitarians and the Universalists looking at Scripture and coming up with different ideas. So that's how we got, historically, the names Unitarian and Universalist. Unitarian, Universalist. That's 10 syllables out of 17 about how we got our name. We are a congregation. That is part of our recent church history. And I wasn't going to talk about that and won't talk about it a great deal, other than to say this used to be called the Unitarian Fellowship of Hilton Head. Some of you remember that, Kathy, right? Yeah. When the building was built and it was decided to move off of, couldn't afford land on Hilton Head Island, you had to come to poor Bluffton to buy land. And even then it was touch and go for a while. But it was decided, well, really, first of all, we need to say that we're Unitarian Universalists. And you notice that I think all of our clergy are very touchy about making sure that both names get said almost all the time. I certainly am, given my background. But there was some real discussion about whether or not the name should be church. Because what goes along with all this individual freedom is a certain suspicion of churches. And so when they decided, our forebearers, who are a few of them are here, Kathy, I know, nodding her head, being one of them. Yes, Patricia in the back, Phyllis, you were here for that? Yeah. When they decided they weren't a fellowship anymore, they didn't necessarily want to be a church, because that had some negative connotations. So they came up with the idea of, well, we'll just call ourselves a congregation. And that's how it came about. Now, a congregation is really nothing more than, the definition is a group of people who meet for religious activities. What's really important is when that noun becomes an adjective, because we are congregationalists, small c, not large c, for us people up north who are used to seeing a lot of congregational churches. We are small c. And what that means simply is, we own this place. This joint is ours, along with the mortgage, by the way. That goes with it. That is not true in a great many, in fact, in a majority of Christian churches. The congregation does not own the building. It's owned by some ecclesiastical committee or group or whatever. It also means that we decide what we're going to stand for as a group. It's not a decision from the Methodist bishops, who may or may not allow people of different sexual preferences to occupy the pulpit. No, that's our decision. We own it. And sometimes it gets us into trouble once in a while. But so be it. Also, the congregation hires all its professional staff. No one is assigned from above to come down here and occupy this pulpit and tell you what to believe. We, all four of us, and Anne as well, and even John, we're only a week away from getting fired. It's really that simple. We serve at the pleasure of the congregation. We have an annual meeting. We have once in a while. We have another congregational meetings as well. We have an elected board of trustees, of which Clay has served admirably, is serving, pardon me, I talked to you in the past tense. That wasn't very nice. Is serving admirably. That's different. That's part of that history of freedom carried on to how to run a congregation. And that makes us different, and it makes all of you important. It's important to be a member. It's important to, when you can, support the church financially and certainly through volunteering, because it's ours. Nobody else's. Okay, that's a lot of history, and sometimes I worry that I particularly perhaps bask too much in what we've done in the past. And I just want to leave by asserting that we should not be bound by history, either religious history or political history, but we need to learn from it. And in this case, in our particular case, we need to learn, as David says, that we are a safe space. We need to learn that we have responsibility to one another. We have responsibility for this building is a remarkable, really a remarkable building for a religious congregation. That we are responsible for ourselves thinking through what we think. I would close just by saying, it ain't easy to be a member of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the Low Country. John? The Unitarians and the Universalists merged in 1961. And that was not without a fair amount of controversy that I was certainly part of. I remember it well. And things were rocky at first. Fortunately, those problems have passed, and I chose this hymn, number 318, to symbolize that we would be one. Please rise as you are willing and able.
I want to thank everyone that was involved in the service today and all the work that was done this week. It's been a kind of incredible week. I want to thank John for beautiful music. I want to thank you, Dick, for a wonderful history. It's always delightful to learn more about our history as a church/congregation or congregation/church. And that's it. Dick, closing remarks.
Charlie, if you are with us, we send you our very, very best. The closing words are from a woman named Olympia Brown. Olympia Brown was the first woman ordained in the United States whose ordination was recognized by a national denomination. There were other women that had been ordained in local churches, but it didn't mean anything. Olympia Brown really has the title of the first woman minister in the United States, and she was a Universalist. She writes, "Dear friends, stand by this faith, work for it, and sacrifice for it. There is nothing in the world so important to you as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before you the loftiest ideals, which has comforted you in sorrow, strengthened you for noble duty, and made the world beautiful for you. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that you are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, and that you are strong enough to work for the great true principle without counting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of your faith and these truths, and work for them, remember them, and love them." Cheryl.
Please join me as I extinguish the chalice. The words are in your order of service. While we extinguish this flame, we still carry on our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment, until we are together again.
Check, 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 1, 2.